Bonnie Lipton was all smiles as she merged her BMW onto the interstate in Atlanta. She knew she'd arrive home a couple of hours later than planned, but she'd simply blame it on the famous Atlanta traffic. Nick had made the delay in leaving well worth the time she lost. He was almost 10 years younger than Bonnie and was an incredible friend. He was good-looking, smart, great to talk to, and had lots of energy. Bonnie's thoughts then turned to her husband, Ron. He had just turned 44 and lacked Nick's stamina. He relied on his experience and knowledge of Bonnie's body to make their relationship very satisfying. It was always nice to go home and spend time with him after hanging out with Nick. She realized that she had the best of both worlds, and her smile became even wider. The farther she traveled away from Atlanta, the less thought she gave to Nick. He was fun, but Ron and her daughter, Casey, were the people she loved. Bonnie wanted to spend time with them now that her energy had been well and truly satisfied. She understood her moods. She'd be patient and loving to Ron when she arrived home. He was a great man and an exceptional husband. Casey was athletic and smart. She had quite a few friends from her sports and school activities. It wasn't unusual to have 2 or 3 of her friends hanging around the house on weekends. Bonnie enjoyed her interactions with the young women, and they seemed to look up to her as a role model. Bonnie made certain she was always well-dressed. She held an excellent position with an architectural firm and was well-respected in the community. She and Ron were well-known individually and as a couple. Ron now ran his family's successful construction company. He was never so busy that he couldn't show up for all of Casey's events at school. Bonnie always enjoyed sitting next to Ron as they watched their daughter play or perform. She noticed how many people admired Ron, but he never seemed to notice it, but it was all very apparent to Bonnie. After hours on the road, Bonnie pulled into her garage to find her husband's pickup was gone. That was unusual and unexpected. Bonnie felt her mood begin to swing. The least her husband could do was to be home to greet her after a long business conference and the long drive home. The house was empty when Bonnie walked through to the master bedroom. She couldn't quite place what caused it, but a queasy feeling began to take root deep in her gut. It was almost dinner time and no one was home. The next day was Thursday, which meant Ron had work and Casey had school. That indicated they should be home soon, so Bonnie unpacked her bag before taking a shower. As she wondered about Ron and Casey's unexplained absence, Bonnie remembered that her phone was turned off. It had been off since dinner the previous evening. She had been lost in thought on the drive home and never considered why she wasn't getting any calls. Ron might be upset because she never called to thank him for the gift. She had forgotten all about him the previous evening as Nick caught her attention. As she toweled her hair dry, she switched her phone on. Ron had once again congratulated himself on his simple but brilliant plan to surprise his wife. He had known of her scheduled conference in Atlanta for months. Bonnie attended them twice a year. As fate would have it, this conference was scheduled to fall on his 20th wedding anniversary. A few weeks earlier, Ron had been approached about building a large vacation home for a family from Atlanta. Once the business part of his meeting was complete and Ron felt comfortable with the client, Boyd Drake, he brought up an idea which had just recently formed in his head. Boyd, my wife will be attending a conference in downtown Atlanta on the 10th of next month, which is our anniversary. I'd like to surprise her and her coworker with a nice dinner at a good restaurant somewhere close to her hotel. To top it off, I bought a special gift which I'd like to see delivered to her at the table. As she eats dinner, my daughter's the one to set that up for you, stated Boyd. She's in college now and knows all the good places in the city. She could make sure the gift made it into your wife's hands. It sounds like you plan on making this anniversary special. Why don't you just drive up to Atlanta with her and deliver it yourself? I've offered in the past, but Bonnie insists she's too busy to spend time with me. She'll have a late dinner and get back to her hotel as soon as she can so she's rested for the next day. I have obligations here, and driving that far just to be ignored seems a bit foolish, reasoned Ron. I just had another idea, added Ron. Suppose I buy your daughter and a friend of her choosing dinner if she'd be willing to sit at the table close to Bonnie's and send me real-time video on social media. I'd love to see Bonnie's surprised look when she opens the gift. I'll give you my daughter's number and you can call or text her and set it up, replied Boyd. I'm sure she'd be happy to help pull this off. Ron had several pizzas delivered to his house for the party he was throwing in honor of his 20th anniversary. He had invited his parents, Bonnie's parents, his brother and sister-in-law, along with Bonnie's younger divorced sister. They were all expecting to watch Bonnie in real time as he surprised her with the anniversary gift. Ron's 16-year-old daughter, Casey, was also there with a couple of her friends. Ron had everything set so they could view the video on the large-screen TV. Boyd's daughter is going to sit as close to Bonnie as she can without making her suspicious. She'll be sending video to me on social media. She's paid a server to deliver the wrapped gift after Bonnie and her coworker, Sue, order their meals. We'll see Bonnie's reaction in real time. This is going to be the best anniversary possible, considering we're so far apart, explained Ron with a happy smile. We won't transmit any audio, so feel free to make comments, including what a great idea I had. Who's the guy with Mom? Asked Casey as Bonnie came into view, holding hands with a good-looking younger man. Didn't you say she'd be with Sue? I don't know who he is, admitted Ron. He appears to be a pretty good friend. Bonnie's father simply made an hair-rump sound and scowled at Ron's statement. As the couple took their seats, everyone who had gathered around Ron's TV easily heard the conversation. It sure was nice of your husband to buy our dinner tonight, observed the unknown man with a chuckle. I'll do my best to make this anniversary a memorable one. At least for you. It'll be even better than your honeymoon. You'd better order the steak, replied Bonnie with a grin. You're going to need your strength. My honeymoon was amazing, really, asked the man. Did you have a friend back then, or did your husband actually make you happy? Ron did an excellent job. Thank you for asking, quipped Bonnie. You're the only friend I've had in the last 20 years. Except for Ron, of course. Lucky for me, he started slowing down, responded the man with a chuckle. The good news is this. Tonight you'll have a far better 20th anniversary than most women have. I'll make certain of that. Maybe we've seen enough, offered Bonnie's sister nervously. This isn't really fair. Bonnie has no idea we're watching and listening. Why don't you turn it off, Ron? We don't want to miss Bonnie's reaction when she gets her gift, Dewey asked a determined but very red-faced Ron. We'll keep watching for a little longer, as the couple ordered. Everyone heard Bonnie refer to her companion as Nick. When the server left with the menus, another server appeared with a beautifully wrapped package. Look, Ron must have had an anniversary gift delivered here to the restaurant, exclaimed Bonnie in delight as she began tearing the wrapping from the package. Isn't it beautiful? Asked Bonnie as she beamed at the gift. Would you help me put it on? Sure. Just lean back toward me, directed Nick as he carefully attached the gift. Once he completed his task, he ran his hands quickly over Bonnie's hands. Your husband is so thoughtful. You're lucky to have such a wonderful man, pointed out an older woman sitting at a nearby table. Right on both points, agreed Nick with a smile. She has a thoughtful husband and a great friend. Bonnie glared at Nick, but the older women simply laughed at his comment. I received a gift last night, which I personally think looked much better on you, joked Nick as he leaned in and hugged Bonnie. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore, whispered a pretty red-haired girl who had to be Boyd's daughter as she turned off her phone. I should have stopped sooner, but I was so stunned I didn't know what to do. I'm so sorry it turned out like this. I'll make sure to erase everything off my phone. I have to go now. The TV went blank as everyone sat in stunned silence. One of Casey's friends was the first to speak. It's getting late. We should leave now. We'll see you tomorrow at school if I even go, replied a teary-eyed Casey. Would it be okay if I went home with my friends, Dad? I feel like I need to be with them right now. Sure, sweetheart. I understand. We'll talk tomorrow. Drive carefully, girls, Ron had to practically whisper. His throat was so dry. I don't know what to say, began Bonnie's mother. I think we must have gotten the wrong impression about things. Bonnie loves you, Ron, and she would do anything for Casey. Don't do anything rash. Ron's other guests pretty much reiterated those sentiments as they quietly discussed the situation. After a few more minutes of quiet discussion, Ron made a decision. I have a lot to think about, everyone. Please find your way out and allow me some time to be alone and go over my options. Once everyone left, Ron packed his bags and began making plans. Bonnie was surprised at the number of messages she had received and the calls she had missed since turning off her phone the previous evening. As she scanned her text messages, her heart sank. Her sister and mother demanded to know who Nick was and why she was so close to him. They insisted she had hurt Ron and Casey's feelings. Her mother and sister had sent her many texts. Bonnie scanned her messages to see if she had anything from Ron and discovered she did not. How did her family find out about Nick, and how much did they actually know? Where were Ron and Casey? How could she dig herself out of the hole she found herself in? She needed to find out exactly what Ron knew, as well as what he merely suspected. Bonnie realized she had to speak to her family members to determine just how bad her situation was. "Mom? It's me. I forgot I had turned my phone off last night," began Bonnie as calmly as she could. "I see you've been trying to reach me. Is anything wrong?" "Only if you think losing your husband, alienating and embarrassing your daughter, shaming your parents, and acting like a complete fool might create some problems down the road. I suppose it doesn't bother you very much, or you wouldn't have been enjoying a fancy necklace from your boyfriend," ranted her mother. "Ron gave me a string of pearls for our anniversary," reasoned Bonnie. "Why would that upset you? Your father and I have seen enough old romantic movies to know what your young man meant when he referred to you wearing his pearl necklace," revealed Bonnie's not-so-straight-laced mother. "Mom, what made you think I'd do anything like that? Why do you think I have a boyfriend?" asked Bonnie as fear caused a knot to form in her gut. "Don't play games with me. I'm not stupid," snarled her mother. "Ron had a bunch of us over to watch you open his 20th anniversary gift at the restaurant. He made a reservation for you and a coworker. I think her name was supposed to be Sue. We saw the whole thing. Your husband treats you like a queen, and you disrespect him. Husbands give jewelry while lovers give presents. Pretty well summed everything up." "You heard me say that," asked a shocked Bonnie. "How is that possible?" "Ron had some friend's daughter do some kind of live broadcast with her phone. He wanted us to see how happy you would be with his gift. Then we were all going to call and wish you a happy anniversary," related her mother sadly. "It looks like it may be your last anniversary, at least with Ron. Maybe you and lover boy will get together again after everything settles down, Mom. You know I love Ron. That other guy doesn't mean anything to me. It was just something to pass the time. Those conferences get boring," insisted Bonnie. "Oh, that makes all the difference," stated her mother sarcastically. "Ron's going to feel so much better knowing his wife isn't a flirt. She was just bored. I guess you have left your crossword puzzle home. Calling me names isn't helpful, Mom. How am I going to convince Ron? He's the only man I love. You haven't even convinced me, so I'd say you have your work cut out for you," replied her mother. "Watching you with that man was the worst thing I've ever seen. I really doubt Ron found it any better." Bonnie considered her situation after speaking to her mother. Her entire family had seen and heard everything she and Nick had discussed at dinner the night before. As she recalled her conversation with Nick at dinner, Bonnie realized how bad her situation was. She decided to call Casey. "Casey, where are you?" asked Bonnie when Casey answered her phone. "I'm with Morgan. She's been trying to console me over my family breaking up," responded Bonnie's daughter. "We're not breaking up. Please come home now and we'll talk about it." "Where's your father?" asked Bonnie tentatively. "He moved up to the lake cottage," replied Casey. "I don't think he wants to see you. He was so happy last night when he asked everyone over to watch you open your gift. You pretty much broke his heart when you showed up with a friend instead of Sue." "Please come home now," repeated Bonnie as she tried to think of something she could say to Ron to gain his forgiveness. Once she ended her conversation with Casey, Bonnie began to look around the house. She noticed Ron's laptop and some file cabinets were gone from the study. His bedroom closet had been completely emptied. It was as bare as Mother Hubbard's cupboard. Bonnie fought back tears as she wandered aimlessly around the house, noticing what items were missing. Ron had not taken any pictures with her in them. That fact seemed especially damning. Looking for something to take her mind off her faltering marriage, Bonnie began preparing dinner for Casey. By the time Casey came through the door, she had managed to conjure up a small meal. Casey was sullen and only spoke to Bonnie when she was asked a direct question. Even then, Casey kept her response as brief as possible. Bonnie admitted to herself that her daughter had good reason to be angry at her, but she hoped the resentment would at least decrease over time, if not disappear totally. The next morning at sunrise, Bonnie walked into their lake cabin to find Ron uncomfortably hunched up and passed out on the small sofa. Numerous empty beer cans were scattered around the floor. "Ron? Honey, we need to talk. Can you wake up, please?" Ron slowly opened his eyes and groaned. He gradually stood and proceeded to the bathroom without saying a word. Bonnie decided to make some coffee while she waited for her husband to return. A few minutes later, a freshly showered Ron came back into the kitchen as Bonnie placed a mug in front of him. Bonnie hoped Ron would begin the difficult conversation, but that hope soon died. It was apparent he had no intention of starting the discussion. "Ron, I'm so sorry about what happened. I love the pearls. It was a wonderful gift which I'll always cherish. I wish I had known you were broadcasting everything to the family. It would have been nice if you had told me about that." "It's unfair" was all Ron managed in the way of reply as he fumed over Bonnie's effort to cast him as the offender. Bonnie was surprised and hurt by Ron's response. In all of their years together, he had never spoken to her in a disrespectful manner. It was a clear indication of the pain she had caused him. "That's not helpful," responded Bonnie calmly. "Tell me what I need to do to make this right. You're the only man I've ever loved. That hasn't changed. We can work through this together. Help me out here." "What exactly is the problem you want to work through?" asked Ron calmly. "Is the problem that I surprised you with an anniversary gift in a nice restaurant where I made reservations for you and a friend? Is the problem I had a client's daughter agree to send a real-time video of your reaction? Is the problem that I mistakenly thought it was a gift you'd appreciate? Explain to me what the problem is so I know just what the heck you're talking about." "You know what the problem is," insisted Bonnie. "You saw me with Nick last night at the restaurant. I know you have dinner with other people now and then. Why do you think that's a problem?" questioned Ron. "You know darn well why it's a problem. I told you I was going to dinner with Sue but actually went with Nick. You overheard our conversation and found out we've been spending time together. That's the problem we need to work on. Just to be clear, is the problem that I, along with your entire family, overheard your conversation, or is the problem that you've been spending time with other men my behavior? Is the problem," admitted a red-faced Bonnie as she finally began to sense the depth of Ron's anger and humiliation. "You were just trying to be nice to me on our anniversary. You didn't do anything wrong, okay? We're making progress. Now tell me why you've been behaving this way, how long you've been doing it, and with how many men you've been involved," demanded Ron. "Is Casey my biological daughter? Is there a chance the mailman fathered her?" "There's no need to be rude or insulting," stated an emotionally stunned Bonnie. "Of course Casey is your daughter. Nick is the only person I've been with since before we started dating. Your comment about how many men have I had and the mailman being Casey's father was just plain cruel." "I'm having some trouble following your logic here," countered Ron. "You admit you've been unfaithful, but insist a line be drawn as to how unfaithful you are. You want me to be understanding, not to mention gullible, when you tell me you've only cheated on me a little. You're proud of the fact you haven't cheated on me very often. By the way, how long have you been seeing Nick, and how often? You neglected to mention those pertinent facts while you were denying your actions. This was the third conference we've spent time together," admitted a teary-eyed Bonnie as she finally began to realize the depth of Ron's anger and humiliation. "Other than you, he's the only person I've been with since we got married 20 years ago that would be 2 nights together for each of the 3 conferences," stated Ron. "Did you ever spend time with him anywhere else?" "No," proclaimed Bonnie. "It was a total of 6 times and I deeply regret it. I owe you an apology. You're telling me a young stud like Nick was only able to spend time once a night with such an attractive person like you?" questioned Ron. "He never spent time with you more than once in a night. What difference does that make?" asked a bewildered Bonnie. "We probably spent time together 3 times each night now for the big question," announced Ron. "Why did you spend time with another man? Was our relationship so unrewarding, so mundane, so pathetic you needed to find a younger, more impressive companion?" "Of course not. I was bored and he pursued me relentlessly. I was weak. It was never about you or our relationship. It was about my vanity, maybe a midlife crisis. He means nothing to me. I swear it." "I see. You spent time with a man who meant nothing to you," repeated Ron. "Have you spent time with Mr. Jenkins, the guy who lives down the street and wears those ridiculous shirts?" asked a very confused Bonnie. "Of course not. I hardly know him, but I find him repulsive." "So he means nothing to you," continued Ron. "You just told me you spend time with men you don't love and who mean nothing to you. Jenkins fits that description, so why don't you spend time with him?" "I didn't say I spend time with every man who means nothing to me," explained a distraught Bonnie. "I spent time with Nick because he was good-looking, charming, and successful. He pursued me." You're telling me you'll only spend time with good-looking, successful men who chase after you. Other than a few guys like that, you're a faithful partner. If you don't love the men you spend time with, doesn't it follow that you don't love me? No. I'm telling you I made a horrible mistake and it'll never happen again, stated Bonnie with emotion. I love you, but not Nick. How do I know that? Asked Ron gently. You promised to be faithful to me at our wedding and a few other times over the years. You're a beautiful person. Good-looking, successful individuals will always be pursuing you. I can't trust you. I can't even give you the great quality time you seem to enjoy so much. Don't ever think that, Ron. I love being intimate with you. It's special and it makes me feel loved, replied Bonnie. What did Nick make you feel that you kept going back to him? Asked Ron softly. Dirty, used, different than a mother or a wife. It was the wrongness that attracted me. It wasn't love. Did you perform intimacy with him? Did he engage with you in a different way? Asked a subdued Ron. Why does that matter? It's you I love, protested Bonnie in obvious embarrassment before adding. You know I wouldn't let anyone engage in an intimate act with me in that way, not even you. I have a lot to consider. You're standing there telling me you love me and not him, yet you engaged in an intimate act with him, but haven't engaged in an intimate act with him in that particular way. Yet, it's hard for me to accept you would do so much more for a man who means nothing to you than for a man you love, reasoned Ron. You haven't indicated you wanted any intimate acts in a long time. I wasn't against it so much as I thought you'd lost interest, protested Bonnie, even as she realized how pathetic she must have sounded. Yeah, what committed person wants an intimate act from their partner, especially when their partner offers them so casually? You told me on our honeymoon I would be the only person you loved, recalled Ron. You and Slick must have had quite a few laughs at my expense. It wasn't like that. He never talked about you. I would have never allowed it, insisted Bonnie. You seem to forget I heard a few minutes of your conversation. He badmouthed me several times, and you went along with it. Remember how I'm slowing down? He gave you a better 20th anniversary than most partners ever get. You never disagreed, did you? Why are we even wasting our time here? Demanded Ron suddenly. You found someone new. I accept that. It seems like you should as well. Why pretend you want to stay together? It's pretty obvious you didn't like being my partner, and we won't even talk about the unsatisfying intimacy. You're beautiful, successful, and intelligent, while I bring nothing to the table. It was only a matter of time before you looked for something better. Congratulations on finding it. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, Ron. We can't let this discussion end so badly. We have to talk it out and find a way back. Bonnie pleaded tearfully. You can have your lawyer speak to my lawyer. We're done, Bonnie. I'm going to divorce you. You've left me no choice. Bonnie went to work that day, only to have an irate Sue corner her by the break room. Why was Ron asking me about going with you to Atlanta for that conference? You know full well I stopped going to those after you decided to spend nights with that guy from the Chicago office. I don't want you using me as a cover for your cheating. Ron called you? What did you tell him? Questioned Bonnie dejectedly. The truth. I haven't gone to the last 2 conferences. I got the impression you told him we were sharing a room and spending time at the conference together, complained Sue. I don't appreciate being used like that. It won't be a problem again. Ron found out this trip. I think he's going to divorce me, confessed Bonnie. What other outcome could you possibly expect? Demanded Sue. No decent person can accept that level of disrespect. I was too foolish and self-centered to even think about Ron finding out, answered Bonnie candidly. He's moved out. Don't you think you made your choice when you spent time with the slimy person from Chicago? Asked Sue a little more gently. I'm sorry you lost Ron, but I warned you it would happen if you kept it up. I wasn't the one who told him, if that's what you're thinking. I know that, Sue. I owe you an apology. I abused your friendship. I wish I had listened to you, but I was so full of myself and entitled. I don't deserve a person like Ron. Ron had taken the day off from work after learning Bonnie was unfaithful to him. He was determined to move all of his belongings to his lake house before Bonnie made it home. He had no interest in listening to her reasons or excuses for cheating. He was sickened when he considered life without Bonnie, but he knew he could never forgive her cold-hearted disregard for his feelings, as well as her lack of loyalty and respect. Her surprise visit the next morning had simply exposed the huge emotional gap that separated them. She had said nothing that could help him forgive her infidelity. He made an appointment with a lawyer for the next afternoon. He was preparing to leave the office for his meeting with a divorce lawyer the next day when he was notified of a new email. It was from Bonnie. He considered whether he should read or simply delete it. After an internal discussion, he opened the email. In her typical fashion, Bonnie had addressed the problem head-on. He felt nothing but despair as he read her message. "Ron, I know I really messed up this time. I was foolish enough to think you'd never find out, so my actions would never hurt you. I was wrong. Lying and cheating will destroy a marriage, even if one partner is unaware that it's happening. You deserve so much better. I have never wanted anything as much in my life as I want you to forgive me, but I will not dispute any action you take regarding our marriage. I forfeited the right to be involved in your decision. I love you and wish you the very best. You're a wonderful person, partner, and parent. This is entirely on me. I accept that truth. Although I hate that I did this to us. You may not believe it, but I love you, and I always will." Ron fought back the tears as he read Bonnie's admission and plea for forgiveness. It was like her to accept the blame for her actions once she had time to consider the situation. She was a strong person who demanded the best from others, as well as herself. He felt empty and could see no reason to respond to the email. He had nothing left to say. After the morning Bonnie went to see him at the lake cabin, Casey was her only source of information regarding Ron. That Friday afternoon, Casey called Bonnie to tell her she would be going to her father's cabin for the weekend. Ron would bring her back home Sunday evening. Bonnie realized that was how her life was going to be moving forward. She spent a miserable weekend thinking about how badly she had messed up her life. She had no idea how she could fix her mistake, or even if it was possible to fix. Had she totally destroyed her once happy marriage? Casey looked quite glum when she came home Sunday evening. Dad's decided to get a divorce. He can't live with someone who's lost all respect for him. I saw him cry a few times this weekend. I'd never seen that before in my whole life. Do you have any idea how much you hurt him? I guess your friend must be a lot better than Dad." "He's not my friend and he can't hold a candle to your father," replied a shaken Bonnie. "It was a huge mistake and I deeply regret it. Your father is the best person I've ever known. Forgive both Dad and me for being skeptical," replied Casey. "That wasn't the first time you were with that scumbag, was it? You've been betraying us for years. Haven't you?" Bonnie realized it was time she stopped hiding the truth from her family. "I was with him at the 2 conferences before this last one. It was wrong, and I apologize." "It was wrong. That's an understatement, don't you think?" Mother insisted Casey angrily. "You betrayed Dad in the worst way possible. Didn't you promise to be faithful when you married him? Did you have your fingers crossed so it wouldn't count? I know you're upset with me, but not as much as I am. Your father is a wonderful man and a great dad. You know that. What I did doesn't mean I think less of him. I was very foolish," admitted Bonnie sadly. Whatever, declared Casey before storming off to her room. Bonnie's life settled into a new routine. She and Casey were barely civil to each other. Work became her escape. Everything there remained normal, except for Sue's cold attitude toward her. She went to Casey's school events but usually sat alone unless her mother went with her. It was the only time she got to see Ron. He always sat as far from her as he reasonably could, and other parents quickly noticed. It soon became common knowledge they were getting divorced. Bonnie occasionally heard fathers, both single and married, make inappropriate comments and suggestions. It was quite apparent that word of Bonnie's betrayal had spread through the community. Ron threw himself into his business. That was the silver lining in the entire situation. The irony was Bonnie would be getting half of the business. His lawyer had proposed a few tactics which would have decreased Bonnie's share of the business, but Ron refused to listen. "Bonnie worked alongside me and even contributed a share of her paycheck to keep us afloat back when we first took over the family business," insisted Ron. "There'd be nothing to split up if it hadn't been for her. I'm not going to deny the facts." Bonnie was quite surprised when her lawyer explained to her how Ron was conceding half his ownership of the business to her. Ron's best friend, Dan, had bought into the company years prior when Ron was experiencing a cash flow crisis. Dan was a silent partner who owned a third of the company. Ron conceding half of their shared ownership to Bonnie left him in a vulnerable position. He owned and controlled only a third of the business. "Tell Ron this is too much," insisted Bonnie to her lawyer. "He's the one who gave the business all of his time and energy. If he insists on giving me a share, tell him I'll settle for 1/10 of what we own. He'll retain control without any possible dispute." Ron was nothing if not stubborn. When the snow melted the following spring, Bonnie found herself once again a single woman, as well as a third owner in Lipton Enterprises. She had been unable to even persuade Ron to speak with her on the phone. He had shut her completely out of his life. Casey told Bonnie she wanted to spend the summer between her junior and senior year of high school at the lake cabin with her father. Bonnie knew it was yet another effort by Casey to punish her, but accepted that she had earned her daughter's contempt. For his part, Ron was delighted. He had plans drawn up to almost double the size of the cabin. Owning a construction company made it relatively easy to complete construction by the end of July. It was now a 3-bedroom lake home. Each bedroom had its own bathroom and a good view of the lake. It was a thoroughly modernized and comfortable home. Ron held an open house for his friends and neighbors at the lake on the first weekend in August. Casey's friends were all invited. One of them brought an older cousin, who Ron could not help but notice. She was a striking blonde who filled out her fairly modest 2-piece bathing suit very well. As the day wore on, Ron found the young woman near him much of the time. She laughed at his jokes and spent time with him whenever she could. "So, Dad, are you trying to get close to Patty?" asked Casey at one point when the two found themselves alone in the kitchen. "Of course not," protested Ron. "She can't be more than 25. And I haven't decided to start dating. She's 27 and seems pretty interested in you," replied Casey with a knowing smile. "She's been asking how long you've been single, how old you are, what you do for a living. All the stuff women want to know about potential partners. I just met her today," replied Ron. "Don't even think about bringing up the word marriage to me. I tried it once and that was enough. I'm not implying anything other than she seems interested. I wouldn't mind if you dated her. She's pretty nice and you need someone to help you get over Mom. From what I've seen, Patty isn't in any hurry to get married. I think she's working on her career right now. That doesn't mean she wouldn't enjoy some company. Thanks for enlightening me," joked Ron to his daughter. "That girl is way too attractive to be interested in an old guy like me, but thanks for the vote of confidence. I appreciate your faith in me." Bonnie's company occupied the top 2 floors of an office building in the business district. A very popular Italian bistro was located at the end of the same block. She usually had lunch there every Thursday with several of her friends from work. Because she kept an informal lunch schedule, she often saw the same people having lunch at the same time. Bonnie and her co-workers became friendly with employees of several other companies located in her building. One afternoon, the bistro was unusually crowded, and Bonnie's group was unable to secure a table. One of the women from Benson Advertising, which was located on the 2nd floor of her building, invited her group to join them at a large table. They quickly accepted the invitation. Once everyone gave their first names in the way of an introduction, the conversation began. One of the women with the advertising group was especially attractive and very friendly. Bonnie found herself enjoying the good humor of the younger woman. She smiled as the other ladies began teasing the woman. "We don't all have a rich partner with a big house on Lake Henry," teased the woman Bonnie knew as Mary. "It must be nice waking up with the morning sun reflecting off the lake." "It is," agreed the younger woman, "especially with a good-looking companion spooning me and making me feel loved. It's a real chore getting out of bed if he's the person who picked you up after work on Thursday. I can see why it would be a challenge," stated another woman. "He looked a little older than you, but seemed to be in good shape. He had all his hair and was pretty easy on the irons, all of that, and more," offered the young woman as she smiled broadly. "He's a genuinely nice guy and a very caring partner." Bonnie's friend immediately asked the very question Bonnie didn't want to even consider. "You aren't talking about Ron Lipton, are you?" "Do you know Ron?" asked the young beauty before adding, "You have to admit he's a good-looking guy." "He's a great guy, but he used to be Bonnie's husband," revealed her co-worker. "I think we should change the subject." "Don't be so dramatic," insisted Bonnie as she leaned toward the younger woman and offered her hand. "I'm Bonnie Lipton. I didn't catch your name." "Patty Lawson. Ron said his ex-wife was beautiful, but I thought he was probably blinded by love," admitted Patty. "It turns out he didn't do you justice. I hope you aren't upset that I'm living with Ron now." "I certainly can't blame you, or him, For that matter, answered Bonnie truthfully. You're a lovely young woman with an amazing figure. I can easily understand why Ron would be attracted to you. I do wonder why Casey never said anything about you to me. I can't speak for Casey, except to say you've done a wonderful job raising your daughter. She's very intelligent and thoughtful as well as beautiful, like her mother. I enjoy when she visits us, concluded Patty. That evening, Bonnie questioned Casey as they ate dinner. Why didn't you tell me your father had a beautiful girlfriend move in with him? That's something I would have been interested in truthfully, Mom. I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I know how you feel about Dad, replied Casey. I'm still upset that you betrayed him, but I don't want to make you miserable because of your poor choices. Patty is really good for Dad. He finally seems happy again. This may surprise you, but I'm pleased to hear Ron's happy. He's a fine man and deserves to be with a woman who loves him. Even if it's not me, I don't think she loves Dad, but she does like him a lot. She's made it clear she's putting her career first for the next few years. She wants to make it big in marketing. Are you going to start dating, Mom? Are you in touch with your friend from the conferences? Do you think you may get together with him? Asked Casey. Nick? He's not the kind of man I'd look for in a relationship, confessed Bonnie. He's shallow, somewhat crude, selfish, and conceited. I never thought of him as more than a distraction. It turned out he led me down a terrible path. Although I knew what I was doing, I shouldn't blame him for my weakness. Are you interested in anyone? Questioned Casey. You're still beautiful. I've noticed how some of the fathers and teachers look at you and go out of their way to be nice to you at my school events. Honestly, I think Ron ruined me for other men, replied Bonnie with a sad smile. The reason for our divorce is known by most people in the area. It makes women sympathize with your father, while men think of me as an easy person to pursue. I suppose I was easy for Nick, but I won't be making that mistake again. I just don't understand how you could have cheated on Dad when you love him so much, wondered Casey. He always treated you with love and respect. What went wrong? I've been asking myself that very question, admitted Bonnie. I think I began to take your father for granted. I knew he loved me. I was very secure with that love. It somehow translated into being with another man. Maybe because I knew I had a safety net at home. Ron was my anchor. He was always there for me. I stupidly assumed he always would be. I could stray a little without him knowing and still have my devoted husband at home. I pray you find a person like Ron when you're ready for a family and learn from my experience. Never take more than you give in a relationship. Be loyal, faithful, and honest. If you find yourself considering anything that could harm your relationship, discuss it with your partner. I've shown you what happens when you lie and betray. Bonnie often ran into Patty during lunchtime and was surprised to find that she really liked her. She found herself eager to hear any news about Ron. However, Casey didn't want to discuss her father with Bonnie, as she knew there were some personal aspects of his life that she wouldn't be aware of. Patty, on the other hand, was more than willing to share details about Ron with her friends. Bonnie, it's clear that you still have strong feelings for Ron, observed Patty one day during their lunch. He never speaks negatively about you, but it's obvious that you hurt him deeply. I won't judge you, but I have to say, I could never cheat on my partner. I find it hard to believe that you did. From what I see and hear from you, it seems like you love and respect him. I want to remind you that when the initial spark fades and everyday life takes over, love isn't always about passionate moments and exciting vacations. Sometimes, it's about making practical decisions like when to clean the septic tank or deciding on a new paint color for the house. It becomes routine, but that's normal. Ron is an honest businessman, a loyal and caring friend, and an amazing father. I'll always love him, but I betrayed him in the worst possible way a wife could. I've learned my lesson, but it's too late now. Last night, I told Ron that I've accepted a job offer in Seattle and will be leaving in 2 weeks. It's a fantastic opportunity for me. I've always been upfront about prioritizing my career, but it was clear that my news upset him, Patty revealed. I'm telling you this so you know what he's going through and maybe you can help him if he starts feeling down. He truly is a wonderful person. However, I know he's not the person I want to spend my whole life with. He will definitely miss you a lot. Ron doesn't make decisions impulsively. If he asked you to move in with him, it meant that he had a high regard for you as an individual, in addition to your beauty. However, he's a strong man. I tested that strength, but he managed to overcome it. Actually, I think he upgraded, Bonnie stated with a small smile. He'll miss you, but he's an amazing catch, and I doubt he'll be alone for long. Yeah, that's why I wanted to give you a heads up, Patty replied with a smile of her own. What you do with this information is up to you. A week later, Dan, Ron's best friend and silent partner, asked Bonnie to meet him at the bistro for lunch. The place was crowded, but they managed to find a small table off to the side. After the usual greetings, Dan started talking about the reason he wanted to meet with Bonnie. You remember that piece of land Ron bought on Route 21 near the river? I have a potential buyer who is willing to pay almost $2 million for it. Ron got it for a bargain. The profit would be huge. Your share alone would be over $500,000. Ron always said that land was a great investment and would be worth a lot in the future. Is he considering selling it? Bonnie asked, trying to understand where she fit into this conversation. That's the issue, Dan replied. He thinks it would be more profitable for the company if he offers it for a long-term lease. He would include a clause stating that his company would construct the necessary building for the lessee's business. That sounds like Ron, Bonnie admitted with a smile, recognizing how business savvy he was. I'm sure he has done the calculations and his plan will yield more profit in the long run. So, what's the problem? I believe we should take the quick profit and sell the land. Thinking 10 or 15 years ahead is fine, but I would prefer to have the money now. You own a third of the company, and I own a third as well. Together, we could pressure Ron into accepting the offer and then receive our share of the profit. Ron wouldn't be hurt. In fact, he would receive $500,000 in cash to soothe any concerns Dan proposed. Bonnie felt anger rising within her as she listened to Dan's suggestion. Are you asking me to betray Ron's trust? Do you think money means more to me than Ron's feelings? Let me tell you something. Ron would perceive this as the ultimate betrayal by his wife and best friend. It would be the worst thing you could ever do to him. Is it worse than his wife having a relationship with someone else at a conference? Dan taunted. You're divorced for a reason. He divorced you because you cheated on him. This is an opportunity for you to get some payback and make a lot of money at the same time, Dan reasoned. You can't play the loyal wife card. We both know that description doesn't fit you. I did betray Ron. I admit it, Bonnie responded, her anger controlled. I was foolish and selfish, but I never intended to hurt him. He's a better person than both of us and deserves business partners who are far more trustworthy than we'll ever be. However, I will never betray him again. I'd rather lose every penny than hurt Ron like this. I have proven to be a terrible wife, and you have just shown yourself to be a horrible friend and partner. Ron will have control over my share of the company as long as I'm alive. In fact, I'll even draft a new will to ensure that he receives my share when I die. You should know better than to doubt his business expertise. He has forgotten more than you will ever know. Bonnie stated angrily as she stood up, placed money on the table to cover her mostly uneaten lunch, and looked Dan straight in the eye. Please don't even think about taking that from me. Almost a month later, Bonnie was taken aback when she opened the door to find Ron standing on her doorstep. It was quite surprising as Ron had been actively avoiding her since the morning after her disastrous conference. Ron, come inside. Is everything all right? Casey just left a few minutes ago if you're looking for her, Bonnie said as she realized how flustered Ron's presence still made her. I came here to talk to you. If you have a few minutes, Ron started as he stepped into what used to be their home for over 15 years. Can we sit in the kitchen and chat over some coffee? I appreciate you coming on such short notice, Bonnie replied quickly. I just made some coffee. Let's head to the kitchen. I'm grateful that you agreed to see me, Ron said, sipping his coffee. You always made the best coffee if I recall correctly. I didn't even know how to make coffee when we first got married, Bonnie chuckled. It took some time for me to get it right. I didn't marry you for your coffee-making skills, Ron retorted. You had other qualities that I found much more appealing. I don't think I've ever heard you refer to them as qualities before, Bonnie stated, still smiling. I do remember you calling them weapons of mass seduction a couple of times. Yeah, you had some powerful weapons, and I couldn't resist, Ron admitted. Patty really had you wrapped around her finger, or some other body part, Bonnie observed. She definitely got your attention. I appreciate how well you treated Patty. She thinks you're an amazing person, and her opinion of you is one reason I'm here. One of Patty's friends overheard your conversation with Dan during lunch a couple of weeks ago. Patty mentioned it to me before she left for the West Coast. She felt that your loyalty and integrity were exceptional. I have to agree. Even after the way I treated you during the divorce, you still turned down Dan without hesitation. Many women who had been divorced so quickly would have wanted revenge. At the very least, I would never do that to you, Ron. I know how much effort you put into your projects and how important they are to you. I also know that you'll generate more profit from that land than Dan ever imagined. He was foolish to doubt you, Bonnie concluded. I appreciate your trust. Patty helped me realize that you are my partner. Even though I've been running the business as if it were solely mine, I need to give you the opportunity to express your opinions and tell me how you would like things to proceed, Ron stated. If you want to sell that property and split the profits, I'll agree to it. Dan has been trying to convince me to sell it, Ron revealed. I think he's strapped for cash. He believes that if we sold the land, each of us would be able to take $500,000 from the business without hindering it. Is that something you would want too? I believe that you have plans for that property that would not only bring profit to the company, but also benefit the community, Bonnie replied, feeling proud. You have always pursued long-term gains rather than quick money. Your intentions are to improve the area while also making a good living. Do you have something specific in mind for that piece of land? I've been in negotiations for a long-term lease with General Hospital to build an emergency care facility on that land, Ron confessed. It wouldn't be as financially lucrative as the luxury condo project that Dan is pushing for, but it would still generate profit, and we would also have the construction contract. This would create jobs and goodwill for the community. I had a feeling it was something like that, Bonnie responded, slightly smug. You are not only a savvy businessman, but you are also invested in the well-being of the community. That sets you apart from people like Dan. Dan believes that quick profit is the way to go. I disagree with that approach. However, I understand that he approached you with his ideas, and you turned him down flat. I trust you completely, Ron. You have never given me a reason not to trust you. I support your decisions regarding the business wholeheartedly, Bonnie promised. I know it sounds strange considering you can't trust me, but it's the truth. I've been thinking about how Dan has been trying to interfere with your business. It occurred to me that we should buy him out. If he's struggling financially, he might be open to a fair offer. He would be happy, and you would be free to run your business the way you see fit, Bonnie reasoned. I considered that possibility, but I don't have the capital to make it happen, Ron admitted. We could sell this house, Bonnie suggested. I could rent a nice 2-bedroom apartment for Casey and me. We've built up a lot of equity over the years. The house is almost paid off, and you made significant improvements. It could bring in enough money for us to buy out Dan. This is your house now that we're divorced. You'd be willing to sell it and put that money into the business, asked a disbelieving Ron. I don't know how soon I'll make the deal for the urgent care center. I can't guarantee you'll get your money back soon, or even that you'll get it back at all. Do I look worried, joked Bonnie. Remember, I was married to you for 20 years. You'll make it back, with interest. If for some reason you don't, that's okay. I owe you, Ron. The money couldn't ever make up for my disrespect, but it will get Dan out of your hair. I'll go along with it if you'll come and live at the lake house with Casey and me, blurted Ron, before quickly adding, you'll have your own room with its own bath. It really turned out nice. I don't think that would work, replied Bonnie sadly. There's the privacy issue, not to mention dating and all the drama that would create for you. I'm sorry. I didn't think about your social life, apologized Ron. Of course you wouldn't want to bring a date back to the house when the ex-husband is living there. Especially that guy Nick. That would be awkward. I don't date and have no intention of starting, replied Bonnie. I stopped going to the conferences and haven't spoken to Nick since that disastrous trip. You're the one who would be inconvenienced. No woman would want to spend the night with you when your ex is sleeping in the next room. Finding a woman willing to move in with you would be extremely unlikely with me there, although I wouldn't rule it out. I've seen how women fall all over you. I divorced you for being in a relationship with that guy, and then I went and moved Patty in with me. My conduct wasn't the best example for Casey, was it, asked Ron rhetorically. My only defense is that I was depressed and lonely. Another person had taken my wife from me, and my self-confidence was pretty low. Patty was able to restore it for me. I'm sorry I damaged your self-esteem. I wish it had never happened, but I certainly don't blame you for moving on with Patty. She's a lovely person. You're single now and can enter into any relationship you desire, said Bonnie before adding, I don't think I ever apologized properly for my behavior. It wasn't something you caused or created. It was all on me. I really messed up, and I'm truly sorry for the pain and inconvenience I caused. You really hurt me, Bonnie. I was never unfaithful. I lived for you and Casey. I went from having it all to feeling like a complete failure, admitted Ron. Patty helped me see that while I may have not been the perfect husband, I wasn't the reason you cheated. You could have told me you were unhappy with our marriage, or our love life, or whatever. I would have worked to make it better if I had known. I was just stupid, Ron, not unhappy. You were a very good husband, a great dad for Casey, and a wonderful partner, stated Bonnie. I lost my way and I deserve to be unhappy. It sounds strange, but being unhappy makes me happy. I feel like I'm paying for my mistakes. Would you at least come and look at the lake house, asked Ron. I'd like to show it to you and get your opinion. I used some of the ideas we discussed over the years on the remodeling. I think you'll approve. Casey has a volleyball match in 2 hours. Can I take a rain check on that offer, asked Bonnie. Let's look at it before the match. We can ride there together, proposed Ron. I'll drop you off here afterward. Aren't you worried people will think we're getting back together if we go as a couple? Usually you sit as far from me as possible, pointed out Bonnie. Yeah, I've been a bit selfish, but in my defense, you treated our marriage poorly. You couldn't have expected me to be friendly to you, reasoned Ron. Actually, you were much nicer to me than I would have been to you if the tables had been reversed, admitted Bonnie. Your settlement offer was far too generous. We both know that it looks like that kindness is paying off, quipped Ron. We're thinking of selling the house so we can buy out Dan. I'm still having trouble believing you're willing to do that. Honestly, Ron, you can have anything of mine you want. You've always been a fair person. I know you won't hurt me, even though I deserve it. Let me show you the lake house, offered Ron to change the subject and give himself time to settle his emotions. Bonnie praised the remodeling as Ron showed her through the house. You really did a great job. Casey's room is so big, and she has her own bath. That's every teenage girl's dream. When Ron showed Bonnie the second bedroom, Bonnie felt it was time to address the elephant in the room. This is a beautiful room with another amazing bathroom, but I can't stay here, Ron. It would be far too painful to see you every day and be reminded of what I lost. We'll sell the house and I'll get an apartment. I'll be fine. We have to leave soon for Casey's match. Let me show you the master bedroom, persuaded Ron. It's bigger than the others. I know you'll like it. This is beautiful. You did a wonderful job, but you always do, praised Bonnie as she surveyed the master bedroom. That's why your business is so successful. You have an eye for detail. Would you stay with Casey and me if you had this room, asked Ron abruptly. I'd still see you every day, and I don't think I could handle that, stated Bonnie sadly. I didn't mean you'd have it to yourself, explained Ron nervously. I thought maybe we could share it. Bonnie raised her eyebrows as she studied Ron's face. Are you asking me to share your bed? I felt terrible since that day I found out you were in a relationship and I left home. I miss you so much. I ache at times. You messed up pretty bad, but I was involved with Patty for several months. That took some of the sting out of your betrayal, but doesn't absolve it. I wonder if we can get past all the bad stuff and try getting back together. I'm not willing to be a casual partner for you, replied Bonnie firmly. If you want to punish me more, I won't do it. If I moved in, I'd be completely faithful to you and would expect the same from you. No more young, attractive people in your bed. There would be only me, or I'd leave in a heartbeat. I've worked hard on regaining my self-respect. I plan to keep it. I love you, Ron, but you have to be all in, or I'm out. No one was more surprised than Casey when her parents walked into the gym arm in arm. She hurried over to speak to them where no one else could hear. Mom? Dad? Does this mean, began Casey, but Ron smiled and nodded before she could finish her question. Casey threw her arms around her mother and hugged her tightly while speaking into her ear. Welcome home, Mom. I love you, but don't ever cheat on Dad again. I have a friend with a single aunt who's even prettier than Patty.